A night in the woods. It was a warm and sunny Friday afternoon in June. That evening, Colin, Steve, Frank, and Chad would come and meet at my house before we would walk down Vanderville Creek to camp for the night. Around 3 p.m., Frank and Steve arrived, and seconds later, Chad pulled up in his red convertible. "What's the plan, Braves?" he asked. "What do you mean, what's the plan? We're going camping, remember? At Vanderville Creek." "Camping?" replied Chad in a shocked tone of voice. "Listen, Bruce, I'm always up for a good brew for a nighter in the great outdoors. But tonight's just not the night. I have a date tomorrow, and I wouldn't want to get all dirty, now would we, guys?" Then what do you plan on doing tonight?" asked Colin. "We're gonna walk around and explore for a little bit before setting up camp by the river." "Don't worry, Bruce. I'll stick with y'all, and I'll just sleep in my convertible. Hey, pussy," said Steve. Okay, I guess that works." The five of us were off. We walked down the hill I lived on, and cut through the construction site to get to Twisting Hill Pike, which we'd walk on a little bit until we got to Vanderville Creek down the hill. However, as we were walking, we noticed a blue minivan pass by us. The driver was going way below the speed limit, like 20 miles per hour or something. The driver pulled over in the ditch as they caught sight of us. The ditch they pulled over in had a steep drop-off, meaning the minivan was now tilted at a 50-degree angle, about to roll over. The driver then made his way out of the car and stood up. It was no one other than Herbert Ernie himself.
"What you boys up to on this lovely day?"
Herbert asked. "We're camping at Vanderville Creek. Now go away," Colin replied.
"Hey, damn it!"
Frank squeaked.
"Camping? That sounds like a brilliant way to spend the evening. A night under the stars is just what we all need these days, eh?"
"Colin, why did you say that?" I said. "Look, Herbert, you aren't invited on a trip, and that's final."
"Nonsense. I will be tagging along, and I now condemn this trip to be the best camping trip ever!"
Herbert declared. Herbert looked crazy. He wore a full, complete park ranger uniform that involved hiking boots, knee-high socks, short shorts, a button-up jacket, and the typical hat as well. He held a lantern in his right hand, the old-fashioned one that ran off a whale blowder.
"This lantern runs off the legend of Frankie. My name is Ranger Ernie, and it is my sole honor and duty to protect this enchanted forest, along with the Frankie spirits. That means I'll be keeping watch of you boys as you sleep."
"No, all you do is ruin our trips and get us into trouble. Please, just go away for once," Colin begged.
"Don't worry, fellas. I'll let you boys have your peace. I will be leaving you boys alone at sundown, so I can make my rounds around the forest."
"Guys, don't worry about it," I told everyone. "If he's leaving us at sundown, we'll still have the rest of the night to relax. We can't stay here arguing with him, so we'll try to ignore him the best we can," I explained. "Fine," Colin replied reluctantly. "Herbert, be good."
"Don't worry, Colin. I do nothing but good. Without me watching over these enchanted forests, this camping trip would be a disaster."
We continued walking and tried to enjoy the rest of our day. We figured that we'd be able to deal with Herbert and his shenanigans during the day, since, we all knew Herbert get even crazier after dark. And then Herbert would leave us alone at night, and then we could relax in peace. Figured we'd let Herbert stay with us for the time being. Huge mistake. Anyway, we continued down Twisting Hill Pike. We decided to take a break at the top of the hill for a breather, and to wait for Chad and Herbert to catch up, of course. Chad appeared to be sweating profusely, and was winded as well, desperately gasping for air. "Chad, I know you're a strong man in the gym and all. It seems like you need to work on your cardio," Colin said.
"I agree, Pro. My cardio can use a tad bit of work. But you see, I try to limit my brodio so as to not interfere with my muscle flow,"
said Chad as he flexed his bicep. It looked quite blocky, but anyway, enough of that. "Alright," I said. "Seems like we're all good now." Okay, well, we weren't all good. We still had to wait for Herbert, who was even slower than Chad. The weird thing about Herbert, though, was that when he did finally make it to the top of the hill, he wasn't sweating or out of breath at all. His park ranger uniform was made out of thick wool, so I found it weird how he didn't break a sweat, as it was 90 degrees outside. He was walking incredibly slow, though. A cheesy grin sat on his face as he approached us. "Okay, shall we continue?" Colin said. "Yes," I replied. We had nothing but downhill to go until we made it to Vanderville Creek. We continued walking down Twisting Hill Pike for the time being. "Frank, get out of the road. A car's coming," I told Frank, who was now nonchalantly strolling in the middle of the road.
"Okay. You with you.
Frank, move or you'll get run over. Frank then began laughing frantically as he ran back and forth across the road repeatedly, almost as if it was some sort of game. The car didn't look like it was slowing down anytime soon, but luckily Frank got out of the way just in time. Frank, you gotta be more careful, Colin stressed.
Just taking things easy.
We made it to the bottom of the hill next, and were hit with a reality. You see, the entire area we lived in had been hit with numerous severe thunderstorms in the past weeks, and as a result, a lot of flooding had occurred. The water levels of Banderville Creek had now returned to normal, but the dirt and mud had left the first 15 feet of the trees and riverbanks covered in a nasty coating of mud.
Nah, your boy ain't fucking camping here. It'd be nasty as fuck.
Steve exclaimed.
Hey, Brookery, even though I'm not camping tonight, we wouldn't want to hang around in this biome for too long. We wouldn't want to take any chances when it comes to my date tomorrow night. Now, would we, guys?
Chad said.
And since this looks like the pirate place to get,
Herbert exclaimed.
the spirit of the enchanted forest is strongest here. Therefore, I must stand protected.
Herbert then proceeded to ball up like a roly-poly and hop into Banderville Creek.
Geronimo!
Herbert exclaimed as the river carried him away. That was weird, I said. Yeah, well, at least we don't have to deal with him anymore, Colin replied.
Well, that'd be a relief, Chief. Now we can camp the way we're supposed to. Big whip style,
said Steve as he tied a bandana soaked in lighter fluid to his head. We made an executive decision to trash the idea of camping by Banderville Creek, based on the nasty mud. Instead, we made our way back up the hill and into the woods, where we camped at another spot in said woods. This spot had a big rock that overlooked the forest, along with a fire ring as well. Colin and I had camped there in the past. It was near the abandoned houses, which were now torn down due to recent construction in the area. The spot was pretty nice, and so we agreed it'd be the perfect place to spend the night at. Colin set up his tent, and I set up my hammock. It was scheduled to be clear that night, but I set up my rainfly just in case. Steve, where's your tent? Asked Colin.
Man, I already told y'all. I'm going big wheel style. I'm sleeping in the trees so the wolves can't get to me.
Replied Steve as he began climbing a scraggly-looking beech tree.
I'm building my tree house.
And we'll have fun with that. I'm staying nice and comfy in my tent, Colin said.
Then have fun getting eaten by wolves.
I watched as Steve built his treehouse, quote-unquote. It wasn't much of a treehouse at all, rather a few sticks and branches that were put into a pile. Steve lied down in a part of the tree where the trunk split off into 3 sections, creating a sort of nest.
Now this is what I call a relaxing life,
Steve exclaimed, making it very obvious that his treehouse was indeed the perfect relaxing spot. Keep in mind, he was only like 5 feet off the ground.
I don't know, bro. I think my preferable might have it beat if we're talking about the relaxing life,
said Chad as he rested his arms behind his head. It was weird how he did this, as he was standing up. Frank then set up his 2 jumbo-sized camp chairs and considered it done. We simply hung out for the rest of the afternoon. By the time 6:30 in the evening had rolled around, the sun was beginning to set. It was time to make dinner. Colin and I had each brought ourselves some freeze-dried meals. Frank brought a can of baked beans to cook over the campfire that we got going, and Chad claimed he's going to run back to his Brovertible and grab some protein powder for his dinner. Chad, isn't your car back at my house? I asked.
Oh, you're right, bro. You almost had me walking back an unnecessary distance. We wouldn't want that now, would we, bros? You would interfere with the gates.
Then what are you going to do? I asked him.
I'm gonna call an Uber. Then I'll grab my Brovertible and park it at the construction site for easy access,
Chad replied as he pulled up the Uber app on his phone. Chad, my house is less than a mile from here, I told him. Though Chad began walking off, so the rest of us began cooking our dinners. Then there was Steve.
Man, I've been thinking like bare fucking grills, G. I'm eating bugs.
Steve then marched off into the woods in search of his bugs. As I was waiting for my water to boil, I looked down the hill and was able to see the lake. The water was muddy, and debris and logs from previous storms took massive residence in the murky mud. I then noticed a bright neon orange mass floating down said lake. I squinted my eyes to see it better, and noticed that it was a kayak. The figure in said kayak wore an orange morph suit, and was paddling at maximum speed, though not very fast, and made a faint sound as they hastily paddled. They rounded a bend and then disappeared from sight. We all muttered to each other in confusion. It was amazing how a tiny figure hundreds of meters away could cause such a disturbance. Colin and I's water finished boiling, and we began eating our dinners. Frank popped his can of beans in the campfire. Steve then arrived back with his bugs. Steve's bug palette consisted of 3 crickets, a grasshopper, 5 worms, 7 grubs, and an assassin bug to top it all off. The assassin bug was huge, looked very nasty too.
Bring on the cans,
shouted Steve as he popped a grub down his mouth. He winced as he swallowed. I couldn't believe it, but Steve actually ate all of his bugs. Though to be fair, they were all extremely tiny, not even having to chew them. However, he did have one more bug left to eat, and this bug was about 10 times larger than the others were. The assassin bug. Steve looked hesitant as he held it by its leg. It squirmed in Steve's hand as it desperately tried to escape.
Actually, man, I need some soup to go with my assassin bug. But I gotta eat it, cause believe me, when I say that you eat this shit, you're gonna wake up feeling like an assassin.
That thing's about to assassinate your taste buds, Colin mentioned. Steve then walked over to the fire ring.
Give me some of that,
he said as he snatched a handful of Frank's baked beans. Frank squealed. Steve then held a handful of hot baked bean chili and dipped the assassin bug in it. He then popped it in his mouth and began chewing, before promptly spitting it out.
Nasty as fuck, that is nasty as a fucking bitch,
he exclaimed. Steve then took his handful of baked bean chili and dumped it all in his mouth so as to get the taste out, though he spilled chili all over his face and his shirt.
Don't worry, Chief, the boy still got the assassin's power.
We all finished up our dinner as the sun set. It was dusk now, and Chad had just arrived back with his protein shake. He was shaking it in the typical gym bro fashion with the sippy cup and all.
Just parked my convertible up the hill and we should be good to brew,
he said. Chad said he'd stay at our camp until around 9 when he usually gets tired. Then, he'd head back to the convertible to go to sleep. It was around 8 in the evening now, and so we all decided to sit around the campfire and simply hang out. We decided to tell some stories as it was pitch black outside now. However, it wasn't until Steve was balls deep into a story about how he put a grizzly bear into a chokehold when I spotted something funky.
Like I said, G, I was safe in this Native American village in the mountains. When I held that grizzly bear's head beneath the water, I drowned its ass.
That's tough and all, bro, but I've got a story that'll really get your brutal heads turning,
Chad said.
So basically, I was hitting the gym,
though I cut Chad off. Shh! Look, I whispered as I pointed off into the woods. Off in the woods was a faint light of a lantern, the old-fashioned kind. It swung side to side as it neared closer, closer, and closer. We were all paralyzed with fright. I don't know why. The lantern was pretty dim, and it didn't seem to actually illuminate anything around the user. It looked like it was floating in midair. It was still quite a ways away from us at the current moment, so we had time to take action. We didn't know who it was, or what they wanted, but Colin and I both had our suspicions, based on what happened earlier that day on Twisting Hill Pike. Quick, put out the fire, I said. We all dumped our water bottles on the fire, extinguishing it completely, leaving us in the pitch black woods. The lantern continued moving towards us. Everybody hide, Colin whispered. Steve and Frank hid down the hill beneath the rock overhang. Colin hid in his tent. Chad chickened out and was sent sprinting back to his convertible, and I decided to hunker down in my hammock. Next, the light from the lantern illuminated our campsite. I then saw who it was. It was no one other than Herbert Ernie himself. The only reason I could tell was because the light from the lantern cast its shadow directly against my rainfly. The lantern highlighted his every feature, everything from the ranger hat all the way to his triple chin. He stood in the crab pose. I could hear his heavy breathing as it echoed through the forest. He just stood there silently, doing nothing. I then got out my phone and texted Colin. Here is our exact conversation. Do you see him? Yeah, he's standing right outside my tent. What should we do? We have to get out of here. I agree. Start packing up your things, but be quiet. Herbert was still standing in the middle of our camp. The dim light of the lantern made the situation even more tense. Just then, I heard the sound of Colin trying his best to quietly pack up his things. It wasn't quiet enough, though, because Herbert then said some words.
You're foolishly, Colin. You betrayed the code of the enchanted forest. Now you must face the wrath of Park Ranger Ernie.
I peeked my head outside my hammock tarp to look at Colin's tent. I witnessed Herbert walking up to it. He then proceeded to unzip Colin's vestibule and crawled inside his tent. Ah! Colin screamed. The next few seconds were a blur. I immediately got out of my hammock and booked it away from there. Colin followed close behind me. We both ran until we reached the construction site before hiding behind a massive dump truck. Next, Herbert emerged from the woods, lantern still in hand. We were both extremely scared that Herbert would find us, because he was coming right towards our direction. We stayed still and we stayed quiet, praying that Herbert wouldn't check behind the dump truck. Luckily, he didn't. He simply kept running right past us, all while screaming. As he did so, we even saw the light from the lantern cast right on the dump truck. We peeked our heads around the corner of the dump truck and saw Herbert run farther down Twisting Hill Pike, towards my neighborhood. Whew, close one, Colin said. I agree. Now we can go back to camp. Colin and I both made our way back down the hill and into the woods, to where our campsite was. Steve and Frank were simply standing around talking.
Man, it's about time y'all get back. Come on, we need some night adventure.
Steve insisted. Shouldn't we just go to sleep instead?
Man, fuck Steve. Dog, it's only 9 p.m. I'm trying to do some ding-dong ditching.
Frank began.
Ding-dong ditching seems kind of risky.
Frank was outvoted, however. We all simultaneously agreed to head to the neighborhood near the construction site to hit up some houses, as Steve claimed. We'd do that before returning to camp later to go to sleep. We grabbed our flashlights and began heading to the construction site next. However, our plans were promptly cut short when we were in the middle of walking up the construction road. It didn't have any houses on it yet. It went straight through the middle of the woods. That's when we saw it. Headlights. Who could be down here this time of night? I asked. Probably just someone here to smoke weed or something. None we have to worry about, Colin affirmed. But Colin was wrong. The headlights soon revealed itself to be a blue minivan.
Hey, what kind of fucking drives a blue minivan?
Steve exclaimed. But Colin and I knew what was really up. We were all frozen in fear as the minivan slowed to a halt right in front of us. The driver's side door opened, and none other than Herbert Ernie himself stepped outside.
Man, me finish speaking my rounds. It's Ranger Ernie's duty to ensure you boys are being sit down. It's time for some Preston exams,
Herbert exclaimed, ultra crazy now that the sun had gone down. We were all out of it, just staring in disbelief and fright, except for Frank, who was laughing frantically. However, what we saw next would send us sprinting in the opposite direction. We looked down and noticed that Herbert was barefoot, which revealed 3-inch long toenails. We sprinted down the road. We didn't know where we were going, and we didn't care. We just ran. Our hearts sank, however, when we glanced behind us and witnessed Herbert getting back into his minivan. He began driving down the road after us. Luckily, we were saved when Chad in his red convertible suddenly pulled up next to us. He rolled down the window. Chad was wrapped in a blanket, even though he was driving. The blanket covered his entire body, so much so that all you could see of him were his hands and his head, not even his neck. He looked pretty out of it, but we had no time to question that, as Herbert Ernie was right on our tail. We hopped in the convertible. Chad drove down the hill that we were running down, but then the worst of the worst happened. We hit a dead end. As already mentioned, the road was under construction, so it didn't yet connect to anywhere. Shit, get out and run, I exclaimed. We hopped out and began running down the hill and into the woods. Chad opted to stay in his convertible. He locked the doors and buried under his blanket so as to hide. But Herbert Ernie wasn't after Chad. He was after us. We ran into the woods and briefly looked back. We were fully expecting Herbert to get out and chase us or something. But no, he didn't. Rather, he did something much worse.
Oh, fuck my frame!
Steve exclaimed. Herbert drove his car off the road and into the woods. The headlights of the blue minivan lit up the forest, revealing our exact location to Herbert. I don't know how he did it, but he somehow managed to drive the car through the forest, weaving the minivan in between trees as he did so. Since he was driving downhill, it looked even funnier, as the terrain was bumpy, causing the minivan to bounce up and down as he made his way through the woods. He wasn't going very fast either, like 5 miles per hour max, meaning we were easily able to outrun him. We continued running until we reached the area of the woods near the rock hollow. I could see the headlight beams moving up and down through the trees. Then, Herbert and his minivan rounded a corner. The headlights blinded us. We moved out of the way and ducked behind some boulders. Herbert continued driving in a straight line and was heading straight for the lake. I don't know why he didn't stop the car, as he had more than 100 feet between him and the water's edge. But no, he continued down the bumpy hill, still seeming to weave in between the trees, all while screaming. As he did so, he then drove the minivan into the lake. The part of the lake we were by was super shallow and muddy, so the minivan didn't sink all the way. It did get stuck in the mud, however.
Somebody help me! Ranger Annie, quite the pickle. What did you say, boys?
Herbert inquired. At this point, we were all tired and didn't feel like dealing with Herbert anymore. Colin got out his phone and called the police, as well as the fire department. 5 minutes later, the police arrived at Rock Hollow, and Herbert was retrieved out of the water and taken away. The rest of us were a bit traumatized and shaken up from what we just went through in the past half hour. We all decided to go home and cancel the night early. In the coming weeks, the fire department would spend millions of dollars raised by the Lake Banderville Association trying to excavate Herbert's minivan from the lake. However, Herbert would have to find a new car. I don't know if he could, but his minivan was completely totaled from a combination of Herbert first running it into the ditch, driving it through the woods, and then, of course, running it into the lake. And that then concludes A Night in the Woods.